In the vast silent canvas of the Himalayan mountains, where ancient peaks pierce the very fabric of the sky and glaciers groan under the immense weight of time, there exists a place of chilling mystery, a place that whispers secrets of death and despair into the thin, cold air. Imagine a lake, a small, unassuming body of water nestled at an astonishing altitude of nearly 16,500 feet above sea level. A lake that for most of the year remains frozen solid, a pristine white expanse reflecting the endless blue of the Indian heavens. But then, for a brief period, as the harsh grip of winter loosens its icy hold and the snows begin their slow, reluctant melt, something truly horrifying emerges from its depths. Not fish, not plants, not the usual signs of high-altitude aquatic life. No, what this lake reveals are human remains, hundreds of them, a macabre collection of skeletons, bones, skulls preserved in the unforgiving cold for centuries, for perhaps even longer. This is Roopkund Lake, often referred to by a far more ominous name, the Skeleton Lake. For decades, perhaps even for centuries before its formal discovery by a British forest guard in the year 1942, local legends whispered of a place where the dead lay exposed, a place cursed or blessed depending on the teller. But it was in that fateful year, 1942, amidst the global turmoil of the Second World War, that the existence of this gruesome site truly entered the awareness of the wider world. The sheer number of bodies was staggering, 800, perhaps even more. A silent assembly of the long departed, their bones bleached and brittle by the sun and the elements, their flesh long gone, leaving only the stark architecture of their former selves. The site is said to be both breathtaking in its natural beauty and utterly terrifying in its grim reality. And with the discovery came the haunting question, the one that has echoed through the valleys and across the scientific community ever since. Who were these people? And what cataclysmic event could have led to such a mass grave in such a remote and inhospitable location? This is not a simple tale of a forgotten burial ground. This is a profound mystery woven into the very fabric of the earth, a puzzle that has defied easy answers for generations. It challenges our understanding of human endurance, of natural disaster, and of the relentless march of time. The Skeleton Lake remains a chilling testament to a moment of unimaginable terror frozen in time, a silent scream from the distant past. Tonight we delve deep into the chilling enigma of Roopkund, the Skeleton Lake. We will explore the initial discovery, the early theories, the scientific breakthroughs that peeled back layers of mystery, and the enduring questions that continue to haunt this desolate yet captivating place. Prepare yourselves for a journey into the heart of a truly unnerving historical puzzle, a tale of 800 bodies and one haunting question that still echoes in the thin mountain air. The story of Roopkund Lake, as it came to be known in the annals of official record, begins not with ancient legends, but with a man named H.K. Madhwal, a forest ranger for the British administration in the year 1942. India was still under British rule, and the world was embroiled in the ferocious grip of the Second World War. Distant battles raged across continents, but here, high in the serene yet unforgiving Himalayas, a different kind of grim discovery was about to be made. Madhwal was on a routine patrol, a testament to the dedication of these rangers who traversed vast and often treacherous terrains to survey the natural resources of the region. He was not searching for ancient mysteries or historical anomalies. He was simply doing his job, navigating the rugged landscape of the Garhwal district in what is now the state of Uttarakhand. As he approached the small glacial lake, a sight that would forever be etched into his memory unfolded before him. The snow had just begun its seasonal retreat, a fleeting window of warmth before winter claimed the mountains once more. And as the ice surrendered its hold, the lake began to reveal its dark secret. What Madhwal saw was not a single bone or a few scattered remains. He saw hundreds of them, a macabre carpet of human skeletons scattered across the lake bed and along its edges. Their numbers were overwhelming, their presence inexplicable. The immediate reaction must have been one of profound shock and perhaps a creeping dread. Here in this pristine, remote wilderness was evidence of a mass death, of a human tragedy on a scale that defied immediate comprehension. Word of Madhwal's discovery slowly trickled down from the remote mountains to the British authorities. The initial reports must have been met with a degree of disbelief or at least confusion. How could so many bodies be in such an inaccessible place? And what was their origin? The immediate assumption, given the context of the global war, was that perhaps these were the remains of Japanese soldiers who had attempted a clandestine invasion of India through the treacherous Himalayan passes. This was a time of heightened paranoia and military movements, and such a theory, however far-fetched, seemed to offer a contemporary explanation for an otherwise inexplicable horror. The British authorities quickly dispatched a team to investigate, a rather rudimentary expedition by today's standards, but one that nonetheless sought to ascertain the truth of the Rangers' shocking report. This early expedition, despite its limited resources, confirmed Madhwal's account. The lake indeed held a vast number of human skeletons. The sheer scale of the discovery ruled out a simple accident or a small group of unfortunate travelers. This was a catastrophic event that had claimed many lives. But the Japanese soldier theory quickly began to unravel. Upon closer inspection, it became clear that the skeletons were not those of modern soldiers. Their clothing, if any was present, was clearly not military issue from the 1940s. The preservation of some soft tissues and hair indicated a different time frame altogether. The bones themselves bore no signs of bullet wounds or injuries consistent with modern warfare. The initial investigators were left with more questions than answers. The mystery deepened, and in the absence of concrete evidence, speculation began to flourish. Was it a forgotten army? A group of pilgrims caught in a blizzard? A ritualistic mass suicide? The desolate and isolated nature of the lake only added to the mystique, making a thorough, immediate investigation incredibly difficult. The local people, the inhabitants of the small villages nestled in the valleys below Roopkund, had long held their own stories about the lake. These were tales passed down through generations, spoken in hushed tones, often with a sense of reverence and fear. They spoke of the goddess Nanda Devi, of her wrath, and of pilgrims who had met a terrible end on their way to her sacred abode. Some legends even pointed to a mythical king of Kanauj and his entourage, who were said to have displeased the goddess through their arrogance and revelry, leading to their sudden and brutal demise at the very lake itself. These local narratives, though perhaps dismissed as folklore by the initial scientific inquiries, provided a crucial cultural context. They hinted at a long-standing awareness of the lake's dark secret, even if the specifics were shrouded in myth and time. The early investigations faced immense challenges. The sheer remoteness of Roopkund meant that access was incredibly difficult, requiring arduous treks over challenging terrain. The high altitude made any sustained work physically taxing. The extreme weather conditions, with sudden blizzards and freezing temperatures, could turn a scientific expedition into a life-threatening ordeal. Logistics were a nightmare. Every piece of equipment, every scrap of food had to be carried in on foot or by pack animal. This severely limited the scope and duration of any scientific endeavor. Furthermore, the scientific tools and techniques available in the 1940s and 50s were far less sophisticated than those of today. Radiocarbon dating, for example, was still in its nascent stages, and ancient deoxyribonucleic acid analysis was decades away from becoming a reality. Investigators relied primarily on skeletal morphology, on visible injuries, and on the few preserved artifacts they could find, such as remnants of clothing or personal belongings. What they could discern with certainty was that the skeletons represented a mix of ages and sexes, though adult males appeared to dominate the numbers. There were also a handful of women and children. This immediately complicated any simple theory of an all-male army or a specific group of fighters. It suggested a more diverse assemblage of people. The initial findings, despite their limitations, did manage to rule out the most obvious modern theories. The bones were old, very old, and the cause of death remained a profound enigma. There were no signs of battle, no obvious indications of disease or starvation. The injuries that some bones did display were peculiar, primarily blunt force trauma to the skull and shoulders, suggesting a specific kind of impact. The horrifying tableau of bones in the crystal-clear waters of Roopkund served as a powerful magnet for both the curious and the scientific community. It was a tangible link to a forgotten tragedy, a chilling reminder of the fragility of human life in the face of nature's raw power. The initial shock of H.K. Madhwal's discovery gradually gave way to a persistent scientific fascination, a relentless drive to unlock the secrets held within the bleached bones of Roopkund Lake. The lake itself, nestled in a glacial cirque beneath the majestic peaks of Trishul and Nandagunti, is a place of profound and stark beauty. Its very remoteness is part of its mystique. It lies in the Chamoli district of Uttarakhand, a state in northern India that is synonymous with the Himalayas and their spiritual and natural grandeur. To understand the mystery of the Skeleton Lake, one must first understand its environment, its brutal beauty and its unforgiving nature. Roopkund is not easily reached. It is not a tourist destination with paved roads and convenient accommodations. It demands a pilgrimage of its own, a challenging trek that tests the limits of human endurance. The altitude alone is a significant factor. At approximately 16,500 feet above sea level, the air is thin, oxygen is scarce, and the sun's radiation is intense. The journey to Roopkund typically begins from lower elevations, with trekkers gradually ascending over several days, allowing their bodies to acclimatize to the decreasing oxygen levels. Even then, altitude sickness remains a constant threat, its symptoms ranging from headaches and nausea to more severe conditions like pulmonary or cerebral edema, which can be fatal. The terrain leading to Roopkund is equally demanding. The path winds through dense rhododendron forests, over vast alpine meadows known as bugyals, across rocky moraines, and ultimately onto glacial fields and snow-covered slopes. For much of the year, the lake is completely inaccessible, buried under several meters of snow and ice. It is only during a brief window, typically from late summer to early autumn, that the snow melts enough to reveal the lake and its chilling contents. The climate at Roopkund is characterized by extreme variability and harshness. Even during the summer months, temperatures can plummet without warning, especially at night. Sudden blizzards are common, even in what might otherwise be considered the warmer season. The weather here is capricious and unforgiving, and it can change from clear skies to a raging storm in a matter of hours. Trapped at this altitude with little shelter and no immediate escape, such a change in weather could prove deadly for any group of travelers. The lake itself is small, elliptical in shape, measuring roughly 40 meters in length and 20 meters in width. Its waters are fed by melting snow and ice and are notoriously cold. The depth varies depending on the season and the amount of meltwater, but it is generally quite shallow, particularly around its edges where many of the skeletons are found. The unique environmental conditions of Roopkund have played a crucial role in the preservation of the human remains. The high altitude and consistently low temperatures, especially during the long winter months, act as a natural freezer. The constant cold inhibits the growth of bacteria and other microorganisms that would normally accelerate the decomposition process. Furthermore, the specific mineral content of the lake water and the surrounding soil may have contributed to a form of natural mummification or saponification. In some of the remains, a process where body fats are converted into a waxy substance known as adipocere. This is why early investigators sometimes found not just bare bones, but also remnants of soft tissue, hair, and even clothing attached to some of the skeletons, a truly macabre sight. The discovery of such well-preserved remains in the 1940s was extraordinary for its time. It offered a unique opportunity for scientific study of ancient human populations, a chance to look back into the past with an unusual degree of clarity. The very harshness of the environment that claimed these lives also inadvertently preserved their story for centuries, awaiting the moment when human curiosity and scientific endeavor would be able to unravel their tragic end. The strategic location of Roopkund, though remote, is not entirely isolated. It lies on a traditional pilgrimage route to the sacred shrine of Nanda Devi, a goddess deeply revered in the Garhwal Himalayas. The Nanda Devi Rajjat is a quadrennial pilgrimage, a grand and arduous journey undertaken by thousands of devotees every 12 years. It passes close to Roopkund, making the lake a potential resting or passage point for such spiritual journeys. This connection to a pilgrimage route immediately offered a plausible explanation for the presence of so many bodies. It was not inconceivable that a large group of pilgrims, caught in an unexpected and severe weather event, could have perished here. But this was just one theory among many, and it would take decades of painstaking scientific work to validate or refute it. The environment of Roopkund is therefore not merely a backdrop to the mystery, it is an active participant in it. It is the stage upon which a great tragedy unfolded, and it is the cryogenic vault that has held its secrets for centuries. It speaks of the raw power of nature, the indifference of the elements, and the sheer vulnerability of human beings when confronted by the full force of the Himalayan wilds. The chilling silence of Roopkund, broken only by the whisper of the wind, carries the weight of 1,000 untold stories, of human endeavor, of faith, and ultimately, of an unimaginable catastrophe. Following the initial discovery by H.K. Mathwal and the preliminary confirmation by British authorities, the scientific community began to turn its attention, albeit slowly and with difficulty, to the skeleton lake. The early investigations were characterized by a mix of genuine scientific inquiry, local folklore, and practical limitations. The goal was clear: to understand who these people were, when they died, and how they met their end. One of the very first detailed studies was conducted in the 1950s by Professor S.S. Sarkar, a renowned anthropologist from the Anthropological Survey of India. His team made the arduous journey to Roopkund, facing the same environmental challenges that had confounded earlier expeditions. They collected skeletal samples, carefully noting their distribution and any associated artifacts. Sarkar's team was among the first to conduct a more systematic examination of the bones. They noted the presence of both sexes and various age groups, though adult males were clearly dominant. This finding immediately complicated the Japanese soldiers' theory and pointed towards a more diverse group, perhaps travelers or pilgrims. Crucially, Sarkar observed specific types of injuries on many of the skulls and shoulder bones. These were not the wounds of battle or the signs of chronic disease. Instead, they were consistent with blunt force trauma, large circular cracks or depressions. He noted that the injuries were remarkably similar across many individuals, suggesting a common cause of death rather than individual accidents or skirmishes. This observation began to give rise to the hailstorm theory, the idea that a sudden and incredibly violent hailstorm with large stones could have struck the group, inflicting fatal head injuries, seemed plausible given the characteristics of the injuries and the harsh, unpredictable mountain weather conditions. But without precise dating methods, this remained largely a hypothesis. Concurrent with these early scientific probes, local legends continued to provide a rich tapestry of possible explanations. Villagers in the lower valleys spoke of the wrath of the goddess Nanda Devi, a fierce protector of the mountains. They recounted tales of a king from Kanauj named Jastaval and his pregnant queen Balampa, who were on a pilgrimage to Nanda Devi's shrine, along with a large retinue of dancers, musicians, and servants. Their journey, however, was marked by revelry and disregard for the sacredness of the mountain environment. According to the legend, the goddess, angered by their arrogance and desecration of her pristine abode, unleashed a terrible hailstorm upon them, burying them alive in the very place where Roopkund now lay. This tale, passed down orally through countless generations, offered a compelling narrative that aligned surprisingly well with Sarkar's emerging hailstorm theory. It provided a cultural and mythical explanation for a natural catastrophe. Other early theories emerged and were debated. Was it a forgotten army marching through the passes, perhaps fleeing an enemy or attempting a surprise attack? The sheer number of bodies certainly suggested a large, organized group, but the presence of women and children and the lack of weapons or military gear made this less likely. Could it have been an epidemic, a devastating plague or illness that swept through a community of travelers? While possible, the suddenness of the deaths and the specific nature of the injuries seemed to argue against a slow, lingering disease. Moreover, mass graves from epidemics often show bodies buried in a more haphazard or less preserved state, unless conditions were exceptionally unique. The possibility of a mass suicide or ritual sacrifice was also considered, though without any direct evidence, it remained largely speculative. The isolated location and the extreme circumstances could perhaps have driven a desperate group to such an end, but it was a theory difficult to prove or disprove with the limited tools available at the time. The initial scientific efforts, though groundbreaking for their era, were hampered by several critical factors. Firstly, the lack of accurate dating techniques meant that the timeline of the catastrophe remained unknown. Were these people from a few decades ago, centuries ago, or even millennia? This uncertainty made it impossible to tie the deaths to specific historical events or known populations. Secondly, the difficulty of accessing the site meant that extensive, undisturbed excavation was almost impossible. Teams could only spend limited time at the lake, and much of the collection was superficial rather than systematic. This led to an incomplete picture of the overall burial pattern and the relationship between the various remains. Thirdly, the preservation of soft tissues, while fascinating, presented its own challenges. Without advanced molecular techniques, it was difficult to extract information from these degraded biological materials. They were a tantalizing clue, but one that could not yet be fully exploited. Despite these limitations, the early investigations by people like Professor Sarkar laid important groundwork. They established that the skeletons were indeed human and numerous, that they had likely died simultaneously from blunt force trauma, and that they represented a diverse group of people, not just soldiers or a single type of individual. The mystery of Roopkund therefore remained largely unsolved, but its profile grew. It became a subject of discussion in academic circles, a captivating enigma that tantalized scientists and adventurers alike. The haunting question of who these people were and what had befallen them echoed across the scientific landscape, waiting for the advent of new technologies and more sophisticated methods to finally begin to peel back the layers of time and reveal the full, horrifying truth of the skeleton lake. For decades after the initial discovery and early investigations, the mystery of the skeleton lake remained tantalizingly out of reach. The early theories, though compelling, lacked the undeniable proof that modern science could provide. The true breakthrough in understanding the Roopkund enigma would not come until the advent and refinement of advanced analytical techniques, specifically radiocarbon dating and the revolutionary field of ancient deoxyribonucleic acid analysis. The turning point arrived in the early 2000s, when a major international scientific expedition was mounted to Roopkund. This collaborative effort involved scientists from India, Europe, and the United States, bringing together expertise in archaeology, anthropology, genetics, and forensic science. Their mission was clear: to gather as much data as possible using the most cutting-edge methods available. One of the most critical technologies employed was radiocarbon dating. This technique measures the decay of carbon-14, an unstable isotope of carbon present in all living organisms. When an organism dies, it stops absorbing carbon-14, and the existing carbon-14 begins to decay at a known rate. By measuring the amount of residual carbon-14 in a sample, such as bone or organic material, scientists can determine how long ago the organism died. Initial radiocarbon dating performed on several bone samples from Roopkund yielded a shocking result. The bones were not from a single event as many had assumed. They spanned a significant period. The earliest samples dated back to around the 9th century Common Era, meaning roughly 1200 years ago, and the latest samples dated to the mid-19th century Common Era, around 170 years ago. This was a monumental discovery. It meant that the skeleton lake was not the result of one single catastrophe, but rather multiple distinct events separated by many centuries. This finding immediately threw a wrench into all previous single-event theories. The idea of a single pilgrimage group or a single army wiped out in one go was now untenable. The lake was a repository of multiple tragedies over a long span of time. But how could distinct groups of people from such different eras end up in the exact same remote location, meeting seemingly the same fate? The answer to this deeper layer of the mystery would begin to emerge with the application of ancient deoxyribonucleic acid analysis. This field allows scientists to extract and study the genetic material from ancient remains, providing insights into the origins, kinship, and even health of long-dead individuals. Extracting usable genetic material from bones that have been exposed to the elements for centuries is an incredibly challenging process. The material degrades over time, and contamination from modern sources is a constant risk. But the cold, dry conditions of Roopkund had in some cases preserved the genetic information remarkably well. The deoxyribonucleic acid analysis performed on dozens of samples revealed an even more astonishing fact. The human remains at Roopkund were not genetically homogeneous. They did not all belong to one population or ethnic group. Instead, they fell into at least two distinct genetic clusters corresponding to the two main dating periods. The older group, dating to the 9th century Common Era, showed genetic affinities with people from South Asia, specifically with various populations across the Indian subcontinent. This finding was consistent with the idea of a group of pilgrims or local inhabitants who might have undertaken a journey through the region. Their genetic makeup suggested a diverse collection of individuals from different parts of India converging for a shared purpose, perhaps a religious pilgrimage. However, the younger group, dating to the mid-19th century Common Era, presented an entirely different genetic picture. These individuals showed strong genetic ties to populations from the Mediterranean region of Europe, particularly from present-day Greece. This was a truly mind-blowing revelation. How could a group of people from Greece end up dying in the remote Himalayas in the 19th century? And what was their connection to the earlier Indian group? This discovery fundamentally reshaped the Roopkund mystery. It was no longer about a single, undated event. It was about two separate and distinct tragedies separated by 1,000 years, involving two genetically disparate groups of people, both meeting a violent end in the same desolate location. Further analysis using isotopic studies provided additional layers of detail. Isotope analysis examines the ratios of different isotopes of elements like oxygen, carbon, and strontium within bone and tooth enamel. These ratios can reveal information about an individual's diet, geographical origin, and even the type of water they drank. Isotopic analysis on the Roopkund skeletons largely corroborated the genetic findings. The older South Asian group had dietary patterns consistent with a population that lived on the Indian subcontinent. The European group similarly had dietary signatures consistent with a Mediterranean diet. The genetic and isotopic data also confirmed the presence of both males and females in both groups, further discrediting any simple military explanation. And importantly, the DNA analysis showed no close familial relationships among the individuals within either group or between the groups. This suggested they were not a single family or clan, but rather a collection of unrelated individuals who had gathered for some common purpose. The scientific breakthroughs of the early 21st century did not just provide answers, they provided deeper, more complex questions. The mystery evolved from a single haunting question to multiple more intricate ones. What brought people from such distant lands to this remote Indian lake? And why did both groups, separated by centuries, meet such a sudden and violent end in the very same spot? The combined power of advanced radiocarbon dating and ancient deoxyribonucleic acid analysis had transformed the Roopkund mystery from a chilling legend into a complex scientific puzzle. It revealed a history far more intricate and surprising than anyone had imagined, opening up new avenues of inquiry and solidifying Roopkund's place as one of the most compelling and perplexing archaeological sites in the world. The scientific expeditions, armed with the power of radiocarbon dating and ancient genetic material analysis, had unveiled a startling truth. The skeleton lake was not the result of a single catastrophic event, but rather two distinct tragedies separated by a vast chasm of time and involving two remarkably different groups of people. Let us delve deeper into these two distinct populations, the South Asian group and the European group, to understand their characteristics and what their presence at Roopkund tells us about the sheer breadth of this ancient mystery. The first and numerically larger group were those whose remains dated back to approximately the 9th century Common Era. This means their demise occurred around 1,200 years ago. Their genetic material analysis revealed a strong affinity with various populations across the Indian subcontinent. They were South Asian individuals, consistent with the general population of India from that period. This group was quite diverse within itself. The genetic evidence indicated that they did not all come from one small geographic area or belong to a single family or clan. Instead, They represented a collection of individuals with different genetic profiles found across various regions of what is now modern India. This diversity suggests they were a mixed group, perhaps travelers from different parts of the country converging for a common purpose. Based on the known historical context and local legends, the most plausible explanation for this South Asian group is that they were pilgrims undertaking the arduous journey to the sacred shrine of Nanda Devi. This pilgrimage has been a tradition in the Garhwal Himalayas for centuries, and it attracts devotees from far and wide. The path to Nanda Devi is challenging and dangerous even today, and in the 9th century, it would have been an even more perilous undertaking. The individuals in this South Asian group included both men and women, and some sub-adults, though the majority appeared to be adult males. This demographic profile is consistent with a pilgrimage where devotees of all ages and genders might embark on such a spiritual journey. However, the greater proportion of adult males might suggest that the most challenging sections of the pilgrimage, or perhaps certain roles within the group, were predominantly taken by men. Isotopic analysis performed on their bones and teeth further supported their South Asian origin and provided insights into their diet. Their dietary signatures were typical of populations consuming a diet rich in millets and other grains commonly found in the Indian subcontinent. This was further evidence that these individuals lived and grew up in the region before embarking on their final fatal journey. The second group, and perhaps the most perplexing, were those whose remains dated much later, to approximately the mid-19th century Common Era. This means they died around 170 years ago, and their genetic material analysis yielded a truly astounding discovery. These individuals were not South Asian at all. Their genetic profiles showed strong affinities with populations from the Mediterranean region of Europe, specifically with people from present-day Greece. This finding completely rewrote a significant portion of the Roopkund narrative. How could people from Greece end up dying in such a remote and inhospitable part of the Indian Himalayas in the 19th century? It defies easy explanation and adds an entirely new layer of international intrigue to the mystery. The European group also comprised both men and women, though again adult males seemed to be the predominant demographic. Their isotopic signatures were consistent with a diet common in the Mediterranean region, likely including grains, olives, and possibly marine sources, reinforcing their European origins. Unlike the Indian pilgrims who likely embarked on a well-established spiritual journey, the purpose of the Greek group's presence in the Himalayas remains a profound enigma. They were clearly not part of the Nanda Devi pilgrimage. It is highly improbable that they were tourists in the modern sense, given the extreme difficulty of travel in the 19th century and the very limited access to such remote areas for recreational purposes. Were they traders, explorers, soldiers from some forgotten colonial skirmish, missionaries? The lack of any associated artifacts that could shed light on their identity or purpose only deepens the mystery. There are no records in British Indian archives or Greek historical documents that explain such a large group of people from Greece venturing to this specific remote part of the Himalayas and perishing there en masse. The presence of these two distinct and widely separated groups raises a critical question. If they died at different times, how did they both end up in the same spot and seemingly meet the same fate? The consistent observation of blunt force trauma to the skulls and shoulders across many individuals from both time periods suggests a common cause of death, a shared and sudden catastrophe. The most compelling theory consistent with both groups is that both were victims of the same type of extreme natural phenomenon, a catastrophic hailstorm. This explanation accommodates the fact that distinct groups separated by centuries could encounter the very same deadly environmental hazard in the same location. The Himalayas are known for their unpredictable and violent weather, and such an event, while rare, could certainly recur over time. The astonishing revelations brought forth by the genetic and isotopic studies transformed the Roopkund mystery from a local Indian legend into a global human story. It highlighted the vast reach of ancient migrations or journeys and the enduring power of natural forces to claim lives indiscriminately. The two distinct groups separated by 1,000 years, yet united in their tragic end at the Skeleton Lake, stand as a chilling testament to the unpredictability of nature and the countless untold stories hidden within the Earth's most remote corners. With the revelation that the skeletons belong to at least two distinct groups separated by centuries, the immediate focus of scientific inquiry shifted to the cause of death. While the Japanese soldier theory had been swiftly debunked by early investigators, the consistent observation of blunt force trauma injuries on many of the skulls and shoulder bones had long pointed towards a specific type of catastrophic event. The leading and most widely accepted theory for the demise of both the 9th century South Asian group and the 19th century European group is a sudden and exceptionally violent hailstorm. This explanation perfectly accounts for the peculiar nature of the injuries and the sheer number of victims who perished simultaneously in such an exposed location. Imagine for a moment being caught in such a storm at 16,500 feet above sea level. The conditions would be beyond terrifying. Hailstorms in the Himalayas can be incredibly intense and destructive, but the injuries observed at Roopkund suggest something far beyond a typical hailstorm. Scientists have meticulously examined the types of fractures and depressions on the skulls. The injuries are consistent with being struck by hard, blunt objects from above. They are not the sharp, penetrating wounds of weapons, nor the crushing injuries of an avalanche or rockfall. Instead, they are often circular depressions or radiating fractures that fit the description of impacts from large, heavy hailstones. Local legends surrounding Roopkund often speak of the goddess Nanda Devi unleashing her wrath in the form of hailstones as big as cricket balls or even as big as coconuts. While these might sound like exaggerations for dramatic effect, meteorological studies and historical accounts do confirm the occurrence of extremely large hailstones in mountainous regions, particularly during intense thunderstorms. The unique atmospheric conditions at high altitudes can sometimes lead to the formation of exceptionally large hailstones, often with jagged edges or irregular shapes, making them even more dangerous. If a group of people were caught in such a storm in an open, exposed area like the vicinity of Roopkund Lake, they would have had virtually no shelter. The high-altitude landscape offers very little in the way of trees or large rocks for protection. People would have been completely vulnerable to the relentless onslaught from above. The impact of hailstones the size of a cricket ball, or even larger, falling from a great height, would be devastating. A single strike to the head could cause immediate death or severe incapacitation. A barrage of such impacts would quickly render a large group helpless. People would have collapsed from their injuries, unable to move or seek shelter. The sheer force of the impacts would lead to widespread blunt force trauma, primarily to the skull and shoulders, as these are the most exposed parts of the body when one is standing or trying to crouch. The fact that the injuries were primarily to the head and shoulders further supports the hailstorm theory. If it had been an avalanche, there would likely be signs of crushing injuries to the entire body. If it had been a rock slide, there might be more varied and jagged injuries consistent with falling rocks. The specific pattern of trauma observed in the Roopkund skeletons points strongly to a top-down impact from heavy, dense objects. Furthermore, the lack of any evidence of struggle or defensive wounds on the arms and hands of the skeletons suggests that death came swiftly and perhaps unexpectedly. There was no time to fight back or even adequately shield oneself from the onslaught. The sheer suddenness and intensity of such a hailstorm would have overwhelmed the victims in a matter of minutes. The hailstorm theory also provides a compelling explanation for why two entirely separate groups of people, separated by a millennium, could meet the same fate in the same location. While massive hailstorms of such destructive power are rare, they are not impossible in the Himalayas. The climatic conditions that give rise to them can recur over centuries, meaning that a similar set of atmospheric circumstances could have led to two distinct and equally fatal storms over the vast period of time between the 9th and 19th centuries. Consider the psychological impact of such an event: the fear, the disorientation, the realization that there is no escape. The sounds alone, the drumming of ice on flesh, the screams of the injured, the deafening roar of the storm itself, would have been horrific. It is a testament to the brutal indifference of nature that such a precise and devastating event could occur. The consistent findings across multiple scientific teams, including the initial observations by SS Sarkar and the later more detailed forensic analyses, all converge on the hailstorm theory. It is a chillingly simple, yet incredibly powerful explanation for the mass deaths at Roopkund. It removes the need for complex conspiracies or fantastical explanations and instead places the tragedy firmly within the realm of natural disaster, albeit one of extreme and rare intensity. The skeleton lake therefore stands as a silent monument to the raw power of the Himalayan weather. It is a stark reminder that even in the most serene and beautiful of landscapes, nature can unleash a fury that is swift, indiscriminate, and utterly devastating. The 800 bodies of Roopkund, both ancient Indian pilgrims and mysterious European travelers, are united not just by their common grave, but by the chilling legacy of a single shared and horrifying cause of death, the wrath of the heavens in the form of giant hailstones. Their haunting question is answered not by human malice, but by the overwhelming force of the natural world. While science has provided powerful insights into the time of death and the likely cause of the multiple tragedies at Roopkund, the why. For one of the groups remains deeply intertwined with the ancient traditions of the Himalayas, particularly the pilgrimage to the goddess Nanda Devi. The connection between the older South Asian group of skeletons and the Nanda Devi Rajjat pilgrimage is perhaps the most compelling and culturally significant aspect of the Skeleton Lake mystery. Nanda Devi, whose name translates to bliss-giving goddess, is one of the most revered deities in the Uttarakhand region of India. She is considered a form of Parvati, the consort of Lord Shiva, and is seen as the protector of the mountains and their inhabitants. Her sacred abode is believed to be the Nanda Devi National Park and Sanctuary, a breathtakingly beautiful and ecologically pristine area nestled deep within the Himalayas. The Nanda Devi Rajjat is not merely a trek, it is a profound spiritual journey undertaken by thousands of devout pilgrims once every 12 years. It is considered one of the longest and most arduous pilgrimages in the world, covering a distance of approximately 280 kilometers over 21 to 28 days. The procession typically starts from the village of Nauti and culminates at the glacial lake of Roopkund and beyond, to Homkund, considered the final resting place of the goddess. The pilgrimage is led by a unique four-horned ram, which is believed to be the vehicle of the goddess. The ram leads the procession, and after reaching Homkund, it is said to disappear into the mountains, signifying Nanda Devi's return to her celestial abode. The journey is incredibly challenging, involving traversing high passes, steep ascents and descents, and often battling unpredictable weather conditions. Devotees face extreme cold, thin air, and the constant threat of avalanches, landslides, and sudden storms. The existence of this ancient pilgrimage route, passing very near Roopkund Lake, provides a strong contextual framework for the presence of the 9th century South Asian skeletons. It is highly plausible that the larger, older group of victims at Roopkund were indeed pilgrims caught in a catastrophic hailstorm while undertaking this sacred journey. Consider the demographics of the older group, a mix of men and women and some subadults, though adult males were predominant. This composition aligns well with the nature of a large pilgrimage, which would attract a diverse group of devotees from various walks of life and regions. People from different castes and social standings would embark on this shared spiritual quest, united by their faith. The specific timing of the pilgrimage, usually in late summer or early autumn, coincides with a period when the snow at Roopkund has melted enough to make the lake accessible, but also a time when the monsoon season can bring severe and sudden thunderstorms to the Himalayas. This makes the hailstorm theory even more fitting for a group of pilgrims. They would be exposed in the high alpine meadows, with little natural shelter, making them vulnerable to such an event. The local legends of the King Jasdaval and his Queen Balampa meeting their doom at Roopkund due to displeasing Nanda Devi also intricately link the lake to the pilgrimage narrative. While a mythical account, it serves as a cautionary tale within the local culture, warning against irreverence and misbehavior during the sacred journey. The core elements of the legend, a large retinue, a journey to Nanda Devi, and a sudden, violent death by hailstones, mirror the scientific findings in a remarkable way. It suggests a long-standing collective memory of such a disaster associated with the sacred pilgrimage route. The pilgrimage is not just a physical journey, it is a profound act of faith and spiritual purification. Devotees undertake it with immense devotion, believing that by enduring the hardships of the trek, they can attain divine blessings and liberation. For the pilgrims of the 9th century, succumbing to the elements on such a sacred path might have been seen not just as a tragedy, but perhaps as a form of divine intervention or a final sacrifice on the road to spiritual enlightenment. Their deaths, however horrific, became intertwined with the very landscape and the religious lore of the region. The presence of the Nanda Devi Raj Jat pilgrimage also sheds light on why the same location might have seen multiple tragedies over centuries. As a fixed and well-trodden spiritual path, pilgrims would likely use the same high-altitude routes, making them repeatedly vulnerable to similar natural hazards like extreme hailstorms. The fact that the 19th century European group also perished there suggests that Roopkund was either a specific bottleneck or a commonly used resting point on this perilous route, even for those not directly part of the Nanda Devi pilgrimage. Thus, for the South Asian victims of Roopkund, their final resting place holds not just the silence of death, but the echoes of a deep spiritual tradition. They were likely pilgrims, driven by faith to traverse the formidable Himalayas, only to be met by a force of nature so immense and sudden that it turned their sacred journey into a mass grave. Their story is a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit of devotion and the ever-present power of the natural world, a chilling chapter in the long and arduous history of the Nanda Devi Raj Jat. Their sacrifice, albeit unintended, became a permanent part of the lore of the high Himalayas, forever linking the skeleton lake to the sacred path of the goddess. Even with the remarkable breakthroughs in dating and genetic analysis that have largely demystified the who and when of the Roopkund skeletons, and a strong theory for the how, one haunting question continues to linger, particularly concerning the 19th century European group. While the hailstorm theory accounts for the cause of death for both groups, the deeper why, the reason for their presence in such a remote and inhospitable part of the Himalayas, remains largely unanswered. For the South Asian group, the connection to the Nanda Devi Raj Jat pilgrimage provides a compelling and culturally resonant explanation for their journey. They were likely pilgrims, following an ancient spiritual path that has drawn devotees for centuries. Their presence, though tragic, fits within the known historical and religious context of the region. But for the European group, particularly those with genetic affinities to Greece, their presence at Roopkund in the mid-19th century is a profound enigma. The mid-19th century was a time of burgeoning European exploration and colonial expansion in India, but it was still an era of extremely challenging travel, especially in the high Himalayas. This region was not a common destination for European tourists or even many explorers at that time, certainly not in large groups. What brought them there? This is the core of the lingering question. Were they explorers or adventurers? While European explorers did venture into remote parts of the world during this period, it is unusual for such a large, mixed group, including women, to undertake such a perilous journey without more detailed records or motivations. No known historical records from British India or Greek archives explain the presence of a group of this size from Greece in this specific part of the Himalayas. Were they traders? The Himalayas have historically been routes for trade, connecting India with Tibet and Central Asia. However, Roopkund is not on a major established trade route. While smaller, more localized trade might have occurred, it seems unlikely to explain a large group of European origin. Were they missionaries? Christian missionaries were active in India during the British Raj. Could they have been trying to reach remote communities? Again, the specific location and the composition of the group make this less probable without any supporting evidence. Were they escaping something? Could they have been refugees, fleeing some conflict or persecution in Europe? While possible, crossing such vast distances and treacherous terrain to a remote Himalayan lake as a form of escape would be an extraordinary and desperate measure. And again, no historical records corroborate such a mass movement. What was their specific goal? For the Indian pilgrims, the goal was a sacred shrine. What was the goal for the Europeans? Were they simply caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, having deviated from another path? Or was Roopkund itself their destination for some unknown reason? The lack of any personal artifacts that could shed light on their identity or purpose is another frustrating aspect. While some remnants of clothing were found on the older skeletons, almost nothing definitive has been recovered from the younger European group that could tell us about their culture, their profession, or their reasons for being there. This absence of evidence amplifies the mystery. Furthermore, the relationship between the two groups is also a lingering question. While they died centuries apart, their common resting place in the same specific area of the lake is intriguing. Was Roopkund simply a natural bottleneck or a predefined campsite on a high-altitude route that both groups, separated by a millennium, happened to use? Or is there some deeper, unknown commonality in their fate? The recurring nature of the catastrophic hailstorm is the most scientific explanation, but it does not fully satisfy the human desire to understand the motivations behind such extraordinary journeys. The preservation biases at Roopkund also contribute to the lingering questions. The remains are primarily skeletal, and while genetic material has been extracted, the story of their lives, their names, their individual stories, their hopes and fears, are lost to time. We know their genetic origins and rough time of death, but the richness of their human experience is largely gone. The mystery of Roopkund, therefore, is not fully solved. While the scientific advancements have answered many fundamental questions, the haunting human element remains. Who were these Greek people, and what extraordinary circumstances led them to their deaths in such a remote corner of the world? This particular aspect of the Roopkund mystery serves as a powerful reminder that even with the most sophisticated scientific tools, some historical puzzles retain an elusive quality, leaving us to ponder the countless untold stories that lie buried beneath the surface of our planet. The Skeleton Lake, with its silent inhabitants, continues to pose its most profound question. Not just how did they die, but why were they there at all? The story of Roopkund Lake, while unique in its scale and chilling details, is not an entirely isolated phenomenon in the annals of history. The world is littered with sites of unexplained mass deaths, mysterious burials, and sudden disappearances that continue to baffle researchers and fuel our collective fascination with the unknown. Exploring a few of these in brief helps to put the Roopkund mystery into a broader context of human fragility, against the elements, disease, or the inexplicable forces of the past. One such example is the Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia. This mystery unfolded in the year 1959, when 9 experienced hikers perished under strange and terrifying circumstances in the Ural Mountains. Their tent was found cut open from the inside, their bodies discovered partially clothed in sub-zero temperatures, and some exhibiting unexplained internal injuries, blunt force trauma without external wounds, and even evidence of radiation exposure. The official Soviet investigation concluded they died from an unknown compelling force. Theories range from avalanches and hypothermia to secret military experiments and even extraterrestrial involvement. The Dyatlov Pass shares with Roopkund the elements of an isolated, unforgiving environment and a group meeting a sudden, violent, and largely inexplicable end. Another compelling case is the lost colony of Roanoke in North America. In the late 1580s, a group of English settlers established a colony on Roanoke Island off the coast of present-day North Carolina. In 1590, a supply ship arrived to find the settlement completely deserted, with no trace of the 117 colonists. The only clue was the word Croatoan, carved into a fence post, and crow carved into a tree. The fate of the Roanoke colonists remains one of America's oldest and most enduring mysteries. Did they integrate with Native American tribes? Did they starve or succumb to disease? Were they massacred by hostile forces? The lack of definitive answers has haunted historians for centuries, much like the silent question posed by Roopkund's skeletons. Then there are the numerous bog bodies discovered across northern Europe, particularly in Denmark, Germany, and the United Kingdom. These are remarkably well-preserved human remains found in peat bogs. The unique anaerobic and acidic conditions of the bogs have mummified the bodies, sometimes preserving skin, hair, and even internal organs for thousands of years. While not necessarily mass graves, Many bog bodies show signs of violent deaths, such as slit throats, hanging, or blunt force trauma, suggesting ritual sacrifice or execution. The most famous among them is perhaps Tollund Man, whose face bears an expression of serene peace, despite the rope still around his neck. Bog bodies offer a different kind of mystery, focusing on ancient rituals and beliefs rather than large-scale natural disaster. But they share the chilling preservation of human remains through natural means. The Haraldskær woman, also from a Danish bog, is another well-known example. Her remarkably preserved body, discovered in 1835, stirred significant debate. Initially thought to be the legendary Queen Gunhild, Haraldskær woman, like many bog bodies, showcases the astonishing power of natural environments to act as time capsules for human remains, providing glimpses into ancient lives and deaths. More broadly, there are historical instances of mass graves from ancient battles or epidemics that, while often explained by documented events, still carry a profound sense of human tragedy. For instance, the mass graves discovered during archaeological excavations of the Battle of Towton in England in the year 1461, one of the bloodiest battles on English soil, revealed hundreds of skeletons with horrific injuries, providing stark evidence of the brutality of medieval warfare. These sites, though not mysteries in the same vein as Roopkund, still offer chilling insights into the collective human experience of mass death. The common thread running through these seemingly disparate mysteries, from the frozen heights of the Himalayas to the peat bogs of Europe or the forests of America, is the way the past continues to reach out to us through the preserved remains or unexplained disappearances of human beings. They remind us of our vulnerability to nature, to unforeseen circumstances, and to the passage of time. Roopkund Lake stands out due to its sheer scale, the pristine preservation of its victims, and the precise scientific breakthroughs that have allowed us to peer so deeply into its past. It is a site where natural processes became a macabre preservation technique, where the elements transformed a tragedy into a timeless puzzle. The haunting question of the 800 bodies is not just about who they were or how they died, but about the enduring human fascination with the inexplicable, with the whispers of history that refuse to be silenced, and with the cold, stark reality of mortality itself. The Skeleton Lake continues to resonate because it speaks to a universal human fear of sudden, overwhelming catastrophe and the profound anonymity of mass death. It forces us to confront the past, not as a neat sequence of events, but as a vast, complex tapestry, woven with threads of known facts and tantalizing unanswered questions that echo across the millennia. So we return to the chilling silence of Roopkund Lake, the Skeleton Lake, high in the unforgiving embrace of the Himalayas. We have journeyed through its discovery, its early mysteries, and the remarkable scientific breakthroughs that have peeled back layers of time to reveal a truth both astounding and deeply unsettling. We now understand that Roopkund is not the site of a single ancient catastrophe, but rather a recurring tableau of tragedy. Two distinct groups, separated by 1,000 years, both met their violent end in the same desolate location. The first, a large contingent of South Asian individuals from around the 9th century Common Era, likely pilgrims on the arduous Nanda Deviraj Jat journey. And then 1,000 years later, a mysterious group of Europeans with genetic ties to Greece who perished in the mid-19th century Common Era. The scientific evidence points overwhelmingly to a shared cause of death for both groups, a sudden, devastating hailstorm of unimaginable proportions. Imagine hailstones the size of human skulls falling from the heavens with lethal force, leaving behind the circular fractures and blunt force trauma that mark the bones of the Roopkund victims. It is a chillingly precise and powerful explanation, attributing the mass deaths not to human conflict or disease, but to the raw, indifferent power of the mountain environment. Yet, even with these profound insights, the haunting question that began our journey still echoes, particularly for the European group. What brought them to such an obscure and treacherous corner of the world in the 19th century? Their purpose remains shrouded in mystery, an untold story lost to the winds that sweep across the high passes. It is a stark reminder that even the most advanced science cannot always reconstruct the full tapestry of human motivations and individual destinies. The Skeleton Lake is more than just an archaeological site. It is a powerful symbol. It speaks of the unforgiving beauty of the natural world, capable of both sublime grandeur and terrifying destruction. It speaks of human resilience, faith, and the enduring impulse to explore, whether for spiritual enlightenment or unknown ventures. And it speaks of the relentless march of time, which can both preserve and obscure the stories of those who came before us. The 800 bodies of Roopkund, their bones bleached by the sun and frozen by the ice, stand as a silent testament to lives abruptly ended, to journeys incomplete. They are a profound connection to a past that refuses to be fully silent, a chilling whisper from the remote reaches of time. As the snows fall once more, and the ice reclaims its grip on Roopkund Lake, freezing its secrets for another season, we are left with a deeper understanding, but also a renewed sense of wonder. The mystery of the Skeleton Lake is no longer a simple riddle, but a complex narrative of multiple tragedies, separated by centuries yet united by a common grave and the relentless power of nature. The haunting question has been partly answered, but the lake retains its mystique, a place where the thin air carries the untold stories of pilgrims and unknown adventurers, forever bound to the chilling silence of the high Himalayas. And so, the whispers of the unknown continue, carried on the mountain winds from the depths of the Skeleton Lake.